President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to join this debate on Bill C-22, an act to establish the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, a bill that will at long last enable Canadian parliamentarians to scrutinize our national security framework and our national security agencies, as our Five Eyes partners have been doing for years. The creation of this committee is part of achieving the dual objectives of keeping Canadians safe while safeguarding our rights and freedoms. It will also stand us in great stead amongst our international partners. In fact, the new Canadian committee will raise the bar for national security accountability worldwide. So permit me, please, to touch on a bit of history behind Bill C-22. For many years, a great many Canadians, including myself as an MP, have called for the creation of such a committee. The government of Paul Martin put forward a proposal that unfortunately died on the order paper. Les questions liées au besoin.
The question of whether or not there's a need to better study the activities of our national security organizations was discussed in 2008 in the report written by Justice Frank Lacabucci in his internal inquiry into the actions of Canadian officials relative to Abdullah al-Malki, Ahmad Abu el-Mahdi, and Muyed Nuruddin. And in 2006, it was also discussed by Justice Dennis O'Connor in his report on the events concerning Maher Arar.
Conservatives were in power. Both the member from Malpeque's private member Bill C-551 and my own private member's Bill C-622 were tabled, as was a bill with bipartisan support in the Senate, all of which would have seen this committee created years ago. Mr. Speaker, my Bill C-622 called for the creation of a parliamentary committee of oversight built on the previous two bills, and also included an additional set of measures to increase the transparency and accountability of the communications security establishment, would have put metadata under the law and created a framework of accountability for acquiring, storing, or sharing information inadvertently or advertently collected. However, the timing of my bill was very interesting because the final discussion and vote took place 1 week after the attack on Parliament, which had been preceded by 2 deadly attacks on Canadian soldiers. And at that time, there was a great deal of concern about security of Canadians due to radicalization and potential terrorism. And so in the remarks following the attack on Parliament, it was really remarkable that all party leaders confirmed their commitment to protect the rights, freedoms, and civil liberties of Canadians, even as security measures were to be analyzed and strengthened. And indeed, Canadians expect these fundamental aspects of the very democracy being guarded to be respected. And so that kind of attention to security measures and privacy is the underlying intention of Bill C-22. At the time in 2014 that I was just speaking of, Mr. Speaker, I invited members of all parties to support sending my bill to committee for further examination and to signal the authenticity of their commitment to protect privacy at the same time as strengthening security in Canada. Unfortunately, instead, the previous Prime Minister instructed his Conservative members to vote against Bill C-622, even though all members of the Liberal Party and all other parties in the House, including one brave Conservative member, voted for it. It failed. It was not passed. But I'm now so happy to see the government follow through on the spirit of Bill C-22, and I was proud to campaign on the promise of delivering stronger national security oversight by parliamentarians. And Bill C-22 delivers on that promise. It's regrettable that it's taken so long, but we can be proud as the members of Parliament who will, I am confident, finally bring this essential parliamentary body into being. After all, as the Federal and Provincial Privacy Commissioner stated in the fall 2014 communique, Canadians, I quote, Canadians both expect and are entitled to equal protection for their privacy and access rights and for their security, and we must uphold these fundamental rights that lie at the heart of Canada's democracy.
I followed with considerable interest the work done by members of the Public Safety Committee as they studied this legislative measure, and as they proposed amendments which were debated and which ended up amending the bill, often with the support of several parties. I would like to note, Mr. Speaker, to what extent I'm happy to see such a change after watching how things went under the previous government when members of the party in power considered bills proposed by the government to be absolutely untouchable.
Laws concerning security measures, and as we know, Bill C-51 followed shortly after the tragedies of attacks on soldiers and the Parliament, and was pushed through essentially with no amendments, despite the deep concerns of Canadians.
I believe that a number of the changes brought to the bill by committee will strengthen the bill and the committee it will create.
To expand the scope of the committee's mandate when it comes to examining activities carried out by national security or intelligence agencies, the power of a minister to determine that the examination would be injurious to national security is now time limited to the period during which the activity is actually happening. Once it's no longer ongoing, the minister will be required to inform the committee, and then the committee can then undertake its examination. I support this change.
I also support the amendment which ensures that the chair of the committee only votes if there is a tie, as well as the NDP's amendment adding denunciation clause requiring the committee inform the minister responsible when any illegal activity is discovered. And I also support certain changes that have been made to the exemptions under Section 14. These are the kinds of intelligence that committee members would not have had access to.
That the new committee of parliamentarians should be able to receive information about ongoing defense intelligence activities supporting military operations. And I support that it should have access to information considered privileged under the Investment Canada Act, that it should have access to information collected by FinTrack, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada. There were certainly certain changes made by the committee that have not been accepted by the government for a variety of reasons. For example, the amendment currently before the House to reintroduce Clause 16, which will allow a minister to prevent the release of information that constitutes special operating information under the Security of Information Act, when disclosing it, could be injurious to national security. This kind of authority exists in the case of other equivalent committees and similar parliamentary systems around the world, and moreover, Bill C-22 would still require the minister to give written reasons for preventing the release of information, and Parliament would be informed of each occasion on which this authority is used. Mr. Speaker, this legislation is a major leap forward for Canadian national security accountability. The new Committee of Parliamentarians will not only provide Canadians with the assurance that their elected representatives, the MPs in Parliament, are on watch to strengthen the protection of their essential civil rights, it will also help identify opportunities to improve on current mechanisms for defending their security. In fact, effective protection of individual privacy and effective delivery of national security measures are not a balance, a dichotomy, or a trade-off. They are complementary and both are necessary. The United States Department of Homeland Security, for example, considers safeguarding civil rights and liberties to be critical to their work to protect their nation from the many threats they face. This third largest department of the U.S. government now explicitly embeds and enforces privacy protections and transparency in all the department's systems, programs, and activities. And in 2014, Deputy Secretary Mayorkas confirmed in a Department of Homeland Security speech that not only is this an integral part of the DHS mission and crucial to maintaining the public's trust, but has resulted in Homeland Security becoming a stronger and more effective department. The original version of C-22 as presented by the government at first reading was already lauded by experts, and it has only become stronger with the amendments accepted from the Public Safety Committee. Crucially, Mr. Speaker, the bill requires that the Act be reviewed by Parliament 5 years after coming into force, so all of the discussions that we're having here in Parliament can be reviewed and the bills can be changed as appropriate. So I'm proud to have contributed to the conversation leading to Bill C-22. I am pleased our government has taken this essential step forward in protecting fundamental Canadian securities and freedoms. And ultimately, this bill before us today will make Canadians safer. It will help ensure our rights and freedoms are better protected. It's been a long time coming, and I invite all honourable members to join me in making it happen.